Welcome to the atrium of the Alfred Deakin Research Institute here on the shores of Corio Bay in Geelong for the 6th Deakin Research Life Matters It's Not My Fault Forum. Baby boomers are those people born between 1946 and 64. And even as they approach their Zimmer frames with the same zeal as they once did anti-war demos, women's lib and rock and roll, they continue to be the dominant generation in the Western world. In his book, Gangland, Cultural Elites and New Generationalism, author Mark Davis claims baby boomers are of such large numbers that they prevent new youth cultures from thriving in an atmosphere of classic rock radio stations and conservative values. This is what he wrote. From Mickey Mouse Club to Frequent Flyer Club, baby boomers have traditionally led a clubbish life organised around happenings and trends, from the twist to hula hoops, to frisbees, to disco, to aerobics, to line dancing. Baby boomers are being blamed for much that is wrong in the world these days, including, I just found out, a shortage of space in cemeteries as they pre-purchase their final resting places. Very grave. Economically, a financial disaster is being predicted as this large group of people come to rely more and more on the health and aged care resources of our country and other countries in the Western world. Well, to look at what might be done to solve the problem, and I can't think of three better people, we've brought together unapologetic baby boomer and much else, Jane Clifton, Professor David Walker and Dr. Kim Toffoletti.
Tonight, the ABC might be lucky enough to have some listeners under the age of 25, who I imagine are a bit whatever about the whole boomer phenomenon. So for their benefit, let's clarify a few terms up front. When we use the term baby boomers, who are we talking about exactly? Well, we're talking about that group of people born roughly between 1943 and 1960, although Warwick's Wikipedia searching has suggested slightly different dates, but we all know the ballpark we're talking about. These ageing hipsters are supposed to be the generation of people power and free love, anti-authoritarianism and radical politics. They're the generation that turned on, tuned in and dropped out. The generation that changed the world and never stopped reminding us about it. From my viewpoint as a member of Generation X, sadly that demographic of melancholy, slacker, apathetic, jaded defeatists, I know it's great belonging to this lot. The baby boomers, they've got it all, they've got it good. So if you'll let me indulge in a few more trite stereotypes, I'll explain what I mean. The boomers are seen to be a self-confident and, to put it kindly, economically optimistic bunch, born into that post-war period typified by mass marketing and melamine, counterculture and conscription, kind of like Mad Men meets Woodstock. You'd likely spot these strange creatures at the Apple store, spending their disposable income on the latest gadgets, listening to their rock and roll as it blares through the speakers of their luxury cars, enjoying the surrounds of their inner city terrace houses, bought back in the days before home ownership was just a pipe dream, leaping out of bed every morning to head off to their important and well-paid jobs, changing the world, spending their children's inheritance, changing the world. But maybe I'm painting too negative a picture. Michael Weinrip, author of the New York Times column Generation B, guess who that's named after, and himself a baby boomer, laments that the terms become synonymous with greedy, spoiled, divorced, remarried mega shoppers. And maybe he does have a point. In fairness, the boomers I know are pretty good when it comes to loaning out money to their offspring, opening the doors of aforementioned inner city terrace houses to said offspring, and providing free childcare for frazzled and hard-working Gen Xer parents. So should they be expected just to hand over to future generations the status, money and power they've accrued? Boomers themselves are probably likely to admit that they might not be too good at sharing the spoils. I don't resent them their comfortable prosperity, so seemingly at odds with their youthful idealism. Really, it doesn't bother me. Really. What does bother me, however, is their reluctance to grow old. I find this interesting. More specifically, I'm impressed by their enthusiasm for and commitment to staying current, seeking out what the young folks are up to and claiming it for themselves. As the first generation to experience youth culture, you might forgive them for not wanting to renounce it in any great hurry. Blue jeans, Converse sneakers, that damn rock and roll, they've always belonged to the boomers. You know, fair cop. And, you know, they can have those, along with hula hoops, Lost in Space. There were some bad things that came from that time, some very bad things. But the problem I have is that they also seem to want a piece of the latest stuff that belongs to today's young people. Those things that young people need to do and wear and listen to and experience and ingest in order to let the world know that they are young people. Baby boomer types seem to have no problem enjoying all of those things that were once off limits to anyone over 50, like music festivals, sleeve tattoos, social media, thigh-high boots, shaved heads, online gaming, piercings, hip-hop, flash mobs, Twitter, scooters, skateboards, file sharing, sex. Amidst the fear of becoming like one's parents, it seems that those fast approaching retirement age are becoming more like their kids in their tastes and inclinations. So I guess the question is, why do so many boomers act this way? Is it because the very idea of youth culture that was invented, packaged up and sold to them in the 1950s and 60s was something they only got to taste briefly before adulthood beckoned? Statistics show, and I did warn David Walker that I would bust out some statistics just to give myself some academic credentials here. Statistics show that in the post-war era, couples were marrying young. By 1974, the median age of marriage for men was 23 and for women it was 21. It seems that for many boomers, those carefree days before the responsibilities of marriage, kids and mortgages were short-lived. But what was implanted in them was the ideal of youth and the freedoms and pleasures associated with being young. Pop culture, music, TV, fashion, film, all made to appeal especially to them. Yet for many boomers, it's only now that they've paid the mortgage, raised the children, worked their way up the corporate ladder, that they have the means to pursue this commodity youth. And what better way of doing so than being an active part of your children's lives, of partaking in what they partake in? Booking a holiday in Thailand when a full moon party's on. Joining your daughter as she gets her belly button pierced. Buying her a Fender Stratocaster if she'll let you join her all-girl punk rock band. Invading Facebook and friending your son and all of his mates. How are the hapless Gen X and Y supposed to rebel? What can be done to differentiate one from oneself from those who refuse to get old? Knitting. I'll repeat myself. Knitting. You heard right. All the cool kids are doing it. Ideally while wearing a cardigan, sitting on a comfy chair with a crochet blanket draped over their knees. It's hip to mend and make do, you know, and crafting is cool again. And I actually put it down to the baby boomers. Perhaps the only way young people can actually distinguish themselves from the eternally youthful baby boomers is to go where no self-respecting baby boomer dares to go, and embrace nana chic. Youth of today, this is my plea to you. Bust out the stable table, grab a pipe and slippers, and dare the boomers to follow suit. I'm serious, I'm not making this up. Nana chic is for real, and I submit as my evidence the trend for grey hair. Young people these days, they don't bother with dyeing their hair strange colours. The boomers are all over that. Instead, you've got the celebrities like Kelly Osbourne, Ruby Rose, Lady Gaga, and that 14-year-old fashion blogger, Tavi Geverston. They're sporting the grey locks. And look, I'm telling you, it's the only way to beat the boomers at their own game. You've got to look and act like the parents of baby boomers, and rest assured, they won't go there. But amidst all the jokes and stereotypes about baby boomers, there is a serious question to be asked. How is the rest of the population supposed to deal with the generation who won't grow old, as they inevitably grow older? Already we're seeing the retirement village and nursing home being replaced by lifestyle villages. These are places where you go to live, not to die. According to one website, therefore, and I quote, people who are too young, too fit and too healthy for traditional retirement villages. Yes, boomers are speaking right at you. And for a price, oh, what living there is to be had. Resort-style facilities and hotel interiors, fine dining and the latest in entertainment. Growing old sounds fantastic. It's just like being on holiday every day with all your friends having fun. But wait, that scenario sounds strangely familiar, like a scene from that quintessential baby boomer film, The Big Chill. Now, for those of you not familiar with the movie, likely those 25-year-olds that might be listening, the plot goes something like this. After a funeral, a group of boomers get together for the weekend, they share their feelings, they dance to the Temptations, get high, have sex. I mean, can you just imagine it in these lifestyle villages everywhere, every day? Baby boomers are reliving that dancing in the kitchen scene every time another of their kind shuffle off. While we may joke about them being a generation of self-interested Uber consumers, all of the evidence suggests that they actually invest more of their time and money servicing the needs of their own children than their parents ever did for them. My generation and those after me are likely to stay at home longer, rely on parents for financial support, travel widely and pursue higher education before settling down to that serious business of adulthood. I don't think it's possible, nor is it really fair, to generalise a generation. Let's not forget that the boom in the bedroom we're talking about here also coincided with a migration boom in Australia. As post-war Australia boomed, there were plenty of other experiences and realities going on beyond the preoccupations and mythologies of the baby boomer. And maybe Gen X and Y have gleaned something from this diverse mix, from migrant culture, our first Australians and our Depression-era elders. Nana chic, ethnic chic, call it what you like. But when you get 30-somethings baking their own bread, tending to their vegetable gardens, reusing and recycling, then you know, whatever the problem is, it's not our fault.
My name is Cestus26. I came into the world in November 1950. I'm an Argonaut, and my parents are called ABC. I row. The reward for my rowing is a dragon's tooth, a golden fleece, and the golden fleece and bar. My anthem and my calling card, when I hear it, always draws me to the radio. I rushed to the radio, and right through the 1950s, I rushed to the radio whenever I heard this sound. So if that's entirely unintelligible to you, I need make no apology, because as a person who's almost a baby boomer, I have been designated a baby boomer here, but I'm going to take the privilege of regarding myself as being on the cusp. Being born in November 1945, that gives me the opportunity to opt in if I take Kim's definition, or opt out if I take Warwick's, and I think that's a nice position to be in. So 1945 leaves me just on the edge looking in and sort of gazing in to see what's going on in there and what the baby boomers are up to. Now, baby boomers are not the only named generation. There have been plenty of them. The Civil War generation and the various lost generations. Quite a few lost generations. They were lost after the First World War, for example. But the baby boomers are certainly the biggest demographic bulge in history. They are the great bulge that won the title baby boomers, and their impact historically has been very considerable right through that period. And it covers, I opt for the Warwick definition because it does give me that on the cusp privilege, 1946 to 1964. Sorry about that, Kim, but we baby boomers will have the numbers, even when it comes to definitions. Now, we also, of course, need statistics. So this is one that's pretty terrific, I think. In the US now, there are 78 million baby boomers. They represent 28% of the population. These are things you should already know, I think, but some of you perhaps don't. So 78 million of them, 28% of the population, and as of a couple of years ago, a baby boomer was reaching the age of 50 every 7 seconds in the United States. Now, that's so astonishing it almost speaks for itself, I think. But there you go. Now, it's frequently argued that the baby boomers have characteristics in common, characteristics that knit them together. And I think this needs a little bit of scientific rigour, because gatherings like this can become awfully anecdotal and kind of waffly. And as a person with a professorial title, it's incumbent upon me, I think, to give a bit of substance and rigour to this discussion. So I'm about to do that. I've decided to take a sample, which is it's what you do in some medical circumstances, but I'm talking social science. A sample that gives us a kind of cross-section of the commonalities that knit the baby boomers together. I've selected 2 males to rule out gender differences, and they're both born in Melbourne to rule out regional and interstate differences. So we have 2 Melburnian males. And they're born in the heartland of baby boomerdom. One late 1954, the other early 1955. And I offer them as my example, again, of the commonalities that knit these people together, their life choices, the trajectory of their life, the kinds of decisions they make about what they value and what they don't, and so on and so forth. My first example, late 1954, is Mark Chopper Reed. Born late in 1954, and my second, born early 1955, is the Reverend Tim Costello. Now, for an audience as alert and as astute as this one, I need hardly point out the ways in which those 2 lives express a trajectory across time that has many commonalities and many similarities in terms of lifestyle, life choices, moral values, the whole range of commitments and life choices that we make on the long journey across life. So I offer those 2 as my scientific evidence of the idea of a generation with certain attributes in common. Perhaps I should also point out at this point that I am an historian, and I do bring a small amount of scepticism to the idea of generations having enormous explanatory power. And generations are proliferating so fast now that I've just lost sight of them. I mean, there's Gen X and there's Gen Y and there's other gens, and I don't know which gen, I can't tell one gen from another. So at least I feel with the baby boomers, I've got some sense of comfort there, that I've got a rough idea of who the hell they are. But all the others, what is Gen X and Gen Y, and how are we going to keep proliferating gens? There's going to be a point at which we become so enormously confused about where they start and where they end that they'll lose all explanatory value. But I think the explanatory value of generations is relatively limited anyhow. Okay, nonetheless, it's certainly true that the baby boomers were the first major generation to experience affluence across their generation. Not everyone experienced affluence, of course, but affluence was a post-war phenomenon across the Western world. The baby boomers took part in that. They also had educational and travel opportunities that were not available to the generation before them. So the world, in some ways, opened up to the baby boomers as travel was democratised and the opportunities to go abroad increased. They were, as Kim also mentioned, the first generation to experience their own youth culture, a youth culture that was directly the expression of their tastes and preferences. But they're also the generation that saw the commodification of their tastes and preferences. So they were the generation that both expressed spontaneity, or believed they expressed spontaneity, a fresh view of the world, but then saw that spontaneity packaged, commercialised, commodified and sold. So the baby boomers do have a particular place in history, and I think they do stand out as a very specific generational formation. So my claim here is, forget all the other generations, there is only one. It's simpler, we'll all understand it. As we baby boomers age and fade, the only generation we need remember is our own. I'm now opting myself into the baby boomer. So the only one we need is the baby boomer generation. Forget all the rest. That's just too silly and confusing. Now, they're now, as we have heard several times already, disappointingly, ageing and approaching retirement. And this is a problem. And I regret to have to mention in a university environment research, but there is research on this question, a vast amount of it, and of course I'm an immense authority on it all. The Australia Institute has done a lot of this research, and it shows that affluent baby boomers are reluctant to retire. They're actually reluctant to acknowledge that word and the implications of that word. And of course 65 has disappeared as something that you have to acknowledge now, so you don't have to really acknowledge it unless you're meeting your Vice-Chancellor, perhaps. But you have to be careful. You have to be careful about the word retirement. But you can't be made to retire when you're 65 simply because you're old and decrepit and forgetful. And I think that's a huge advance. I'm very much in favour of that because I think it's discriminatory to object to people on those grounds, especially in a university and in an academic environment. I think we need to expose younger generations to that kind of frailty because I think it's educational for them. You might no longer be able to say anything intelligible about the First World War, the Second World War, the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, but you can be an exemplary demonstration of decrepitude. And that ladies and gentlemen, has its own educational value. So I'm planning to stick around. So this research, the Australia Institute research, makes very clear that the baby boomers, the affluent baby boomers in particular, don't want to retire. There are a couple of reasons for this, and they're both true because they're written down here. They want to keep working largely because they want to. They quite like the idea of working and they think it's valuable for them neurologically. It's good for their neural pathways. We baby boomers are pretty good on neural pathways too, Ken. We're better on neural pathways than frisbees, in fact, because that's the new frontier we're conquering now. And because the other argument put forward by the Australia Institute is that continuing to work postpones the idea of ageing itself, which for baby boomers has a particular kind of psychological peril attached to it, because it's a generation, as we know, attached to a youth culture that in a sense created a youth culture, created its own youth culture, and the idea that we're somehow stepping beyond youth and into this other kind of decrepitude is particularly alarming for us. So we don't acknowledge retirement and we continue working in the hope that awful prospect will not be something we have to face. Now, for those of you who can remember Oz magazine, I actually did a little bit of reading around Oz magazine recently, not for this august purpose, so I'm drawing upon deep research here, but Oz magazine, if you go back to it, its vilification of old people was tremendous. It was something to behold, especially if you were young yourself. It's a chilling experience now to read Oz if you're over 50, and I am, as a matter of fact. So you go back to Oz now, and old people are stupid, and they're incapable, and they're narrow-minded, and they're messing up the country, and all the rest of it. So we grew up through a period when age was seriously vilified as a kind of stupidity. It was stupidity writ large. So one can understand why baby boomers, affluent baby boomers, resist that particular categorisation, because deep wired into us is this supposition that we're entering a territory that we're seriously uncomfortable about. Now, there are less affluent baby boomers, believe it or not, and the research shows that they also want to keep working, not because they want to, but because they have to, because their financial circumstances are not secure enough for them to continue. So you have the two groups. I want to point out that there are at least two groups of baby boomers, wealthy ones and others. Righto. The research also went into this question that has been touched upon already, and that do the baby boomers regard themselves as a favoured generation? And of course there's a lot of discussion to this effect, some of which we've heard rather invidiously this evening already, I regret to point out. Kim? So, are they a favoured generation? Well, there are lots of focus groups and news polls and things that demonstrated that the baby boomers don't see themselves as a favoured generation. Why is it so, I hear you ask? It is so because they regard themselves as being, in a sense, the guinea pigs of social policies and superannuation schemes which may deliver less to them than they'd hoped or believed. In other words, superannuation came later in their working lives, and here they are being asked to depend upon something that, as we all know, as the world heads towards its next global financial crisis, is absolutely unpredictable and totally unreliable. So the baby boomers do not see themselves as a favoured generation. Warwick, do you see yourself as a favoured generation? Okay.
Discuss.
Discuss. Now, the other point that I wanted to touch upon, and of course, if I was given the full professorial lectern and the 50 minutes, I would dissect this with surgical care. But of course, I'm denied that opportunity, so I just have to raise it with you this evening and sort of put it on the table and leave it lying there like some inert corpse that we can all sort of look at and sort of shudder over and then move away from. But it's odium. I'm referring to odium. It's a good word, odium, especially in Scrabble. It's something baby boomers do a lot of, because you get 2 for the D, and I think M is 3, and it's good to get rid of a U, because unless you've got a Q, of course. Q on the triple letter score is terrific. So if you can do the Q, no, that's not what we're talking about, is it? But Scrabble hasn't been mentioned and should be. If you research this question, as I have so obviously done, you'll discover that there's an enormous amount of odium attached to the baby boomer generation. They've done terrible things, and Warwick's already touched upon this. And you know, all the world's crises and problems are easily sourced to the baby boomers. I think this is particularly the case in the US and the UK. We do a bit of it ourselves, of course, but they're exceptionally good at it. And all you have to do is a little bit of a cruise around Google to find out all the things that the baby boomers have been responsible for. The moral collapse of the modern world as we know it is a baby boomer responsibility. All the global financial crises that we're facing on a fortnightly basis, baby boomers. Collapse of Ireland, baby boomers. Imminent collapse of Spain, Greece, of course, baby boomers did that. Portugal and Spain, baby boomers. Italy, Berlusconi and the baby boomers. So it's a pretty good it's a terrific explanatory thing, really, because all you have to do is come up with the word baby boom for any problem that you've got. I'm quite interested in Australia's relationship with Asia. The only thing the baby boomers haven't been blamed for is the rise of China. But I'm putting it out there because I think there's an opportunity for someone to create a space for themselves as a social commentator by blaming the rise of China on the baby boomers. But that's a huge problem that we have with the baby boomers, that they've done all these terrible things. So they've got the world into the awful mess it's in now, and they're asking others to clean up the mess, Kim's generation for the most part, and they're also asking her generation to pay for it. Not only to pay for cleaning up the mess, but to pay for the baby boomers in retirement. Well, that seems all entirely fair and reasonable to me, given the contribution that we have obviously made to the world as we know it. Okay. Do I have time for a profoundly important point, Warwick? The baby boomers and leadership. I've done some really original research on this question, and I was shocked to find how late Australia came to baby boomer leadership in the political sense. The United States, you will recall a person called Bill Clinton, who had lots of baby boomer attributes, especially when dealing with Monica. He came to power in 1993 as a baby boomer, an authentic baby boomer. Tony Blair came to power in 1997, baby boomer. Our first baby boomer was Kevin Rudd as Prime Minister, 2007. We kept him for a year and threw him out. We got another one, but why are we so late getting to baby boomers? I thought we were a young country and we were supposed to be good at doing things of a youthful kind, but here we are. We give this tremendous lead time to others. And I'm sure political scientists will take that observation up and run with it, because I think it is, although I hesitate to say so myself, I think it's quite a profound one. I'm not sure what's profound about it, but that's the responsibility of others. That's what research is, you see. You come up with an idea. If you're at a writers' festival, you call it a big idea, so that people kind of know the scale of what you're talking about. So you put out a big idea, and then it's the responsibility of other people, lesser people, smaller people, more industrious people perhaps, more disciplined people, perhaps more skilled people, maybe even more intelligent people, to take the big idea and make something worthwhile of it, or perhaps just quietly discard it when it turns out to be not so big after all. Okay, so I think the other point that needs to be made about the baby boomers, and I'm now getting to the point where I'm making my final points about baby boomers, but not absolutely. The other point is the framing of that generation. That is, especially in the United States, behind them they had the greatest, what was called the greatest generation, the people who went through the Depression and the Great War, and they were regarded as authentic heroes. They were people who understood genuine hardship, genuine patriotism. So against that background, the baby boomers are regarded as kind of inauthentic, soft. They don't know real hardship, self-indulgent. They're a generation that are morally frail and morally weak. And the other point, perhaps, I think is worth mentioning is that I think now, as baby boomers get to that retirement phase in their life, the likelihood is, and I think their trajectory has been away from family and away from the mainstream values of earlier generations, they'll discover or attempt to discover a reconnection with that background and those values. They'll attempt to rediscover, rethink, reimagine history. And as a historian, I can only imagine that to be a good thing as the baby boomers return to the fold, return to history, and return to a new way of doing things.
Hello, my name is Jane, and I'm a baby boomer. I'm sure you can tell just by looking at me, and I'm sure you've all heard the following, but just to refresh your memories about baby boomers. First, we survived being born to mothers who smoked and drank while they were pregnant. They took aspirin, they ate blue cheese dressing, they ate tuna from a can, and they did not get tested for diabetes. After surviving that trauma, we were put to sleep on our tummies in baby cribs covered with brightly coloured lead paints. We were corralled in playpens and taken for walks on a lead. There were no child-proof lids on medicine bottles. I remember a very great fondness for Junior Aspro. Remember that? It was pink and it was square. I think I ate an entire half bottle when I was 6. There were no locks on doors or cabinets. We were driven home from hospital on our mother's laps in the front seat of the car. No capsule, no booster seats, no seat belts, no airbags. Our parents' cars had bald tyres and sometimes no brakes. Later on, as we grew up, we rode in the back of the ute standing up. We lay stretched out to sleep in the back of the station wagon looking at the stars. Special. We drank water from a garden hose and shared one soft drink bottle with 4 friends, and no one died. We ate cupcakes, white bread, real butter and bacon. We drank March's lemonade because it was sparkle-lark-a-larkly. And we had home-delivered loys, and they were all made with real white sugar. But we weren't overweight because we were always outside playing, running, always running. We left home in the morning to walk or catch the bus to school. We spent lunchtime and recess skipping, playing ball games and hopscotch. Then we walked or bussed home and played in the streets until the lights came on. We rode our bikes with no helmets. No one was able to reach us all day, and we were okay. We did not have PlayStations, Nintendos and Xboxes. There were no video games, DVDs, no surround sound or CDs, no 150 channels on cable. Face it, in my day, although television had just been invented, I didn't know anyone who owned a set. I didn't see one until I was 12. There were no personal computers, no internet, no chat rooms, Facebook or Twitter. We had friends. 3D friends. We went outside and met those friends. We walked to their houses, knocked on the door, or just walked in, and we talked to them. We fell out of trees, we got cuts and bruises, we broke bones and teeth, and no one sued anyone. Bit of Dettol and a plaster and off you went. We ate worms and mud pies made from dirt, and the worms did not live in us forever. We made up games with sticks and tennis balls, and although we were told it would happen, we didn't put out very many eyes. School sports had tryouts, and not everybody made the team. Those who didn't had to learn to deal with disappointment. There were no participation ribbons. There was just first, second, and third, winners and losers. The idea of a parent bailing us out if we broke the law was unheard of. If the cops brought you home because of a misdemeanour, your parents actually sided with the law, and you got punished. The past 50 years have seen an explosion of innovation and new ideas and have produced some of the best risk-takers, problem solvers and inventors ever. We had freedom, failure, success and responsibility, and we learned how to deal with it all. Kind of makes you want to run through the house with scissors, doesn't it? Yes, proud senior card-carrying baby boomer me, it has been my great pleasure and privilege to create the world in 7 decades. But it's not my fault, the state the world is in. We baby boomers came into being immediately following the end of hostilities at the close of World War II, and you will note that since the creation of baby boomers, there has been no World War III. Make love, not war. That we created that slogan. War, good God, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. We made that up. Wars were bad. We knew that instinctively in the womb. Since baby boomers came into being, we have, of course, noted that wars do happen all over the world every single day, with no possible end in sight, no chance of having an end or a beginning like the good old days, no sense of fair play or rules, and when one stops for a minute, another one takes up the baton. Baby boomers have seen the vast proliferation of wars in countries no one had ever heard of, at least not by that name, over religions no one can even begin to comprehend. But none of this is our fault. We were the peace, love and happiness generation, and we stand proudly on our record that there has been no World War III on our watch. And I believe that deserves a round of applause. Thank you very much. Speaking of records, modern music is not our fault. We created a perfectly formed set of tunes and songs over a number of decades that obviated the need for anyone else to write any new ones. We created rock and roll, we gave you the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan, Janis, Jim, Otis and Jimmy. Our last great work was Little Feat, and it's been downhill since then, from Air Supply to Eminem to Lady Gag Me with a Spoon, I'm so stupid. Madonna was not our fault. Kylie Minogue was not our fault. Boy George, Wham, Milli Vanilli, Bryan Adams and Jedward were not our fault. We gave the world Aretha Franklin and the band and Joni Mitchell and Gladys Knight and Leon Russell and Sam Cooke and the entire lineup at Monterey and Woodstock. Modern music is reduced to sampling bits and pieces of baby boomer gold to stick in their monotonous, foul-mouthed nursery rhymes. Speaking of foul-mouthed, the state of Aussie rules is not my fault. The emergence and creation of the Australian Financial League, the AFL, is the work of the devil incarnate and is headed back where it came from, to hell in a handcart. Granted, baby boomers cannot take credit for the creation of football, but we were perfectly content with the VFL, the waffle and the sandful, and our generation saw out the last of its glory days on suburban ovals around Melbourne, Adelaide and Perth, all of us perfectly content with its sense of loyalty and local pride. The parlous state of television, of football on television, played on 2.5 proper Victorian ovals and a handful of interstate grounds borrowed from rugby and cricket fixtures, is shameful. And speaking of games, don't get me started on the Olympics. The modern Olympic Games are not my fault. Let's go back to the ancient Olympics, where everyone competed in the nude. There's your TV audience from the get-go. The modern Olympic Games are not my fault. This is a sporting event where the hosting rights bidding process is watched by more people than the final of the 100-metre sprint, where more money is spent on the opening ceremony than the annual gross national income of some of the competing countries. Sports people reached the outer limits of physical achievement decades ago, when the last of the baby boomer competitors reached their peak. And yet this extended advertorial disguised as a sporting event continues to push the myth that the contestants win their medals without a speedy cup of coffee before the starter's gun. Kids watching the Olympics know more about the contestants' endorsement deals than they do about the country they're representing. A modern Olympic gold medal may well be a special moment to strive for, but a lucrative advertising deal for a breakfast cereal or chocolate spread is for keeps. None of this is my fault, and neither, may I say, is the state of the environment. Let me tell you a story. A baby boomer stood in line at the supermarket recently and was admonished at the checkout for not bringing her own bags because plastic bags weren't good for the environment. The woman apologised to the checkout chap and explained, "We didn't have the green thing back in my day." To which the checkout chap responded, "That's our problem today. Your generation didn't care enough to save our environment." He was right. Our generation didn't have the green thing. Back then, we returned milk bottles, soft drink bottles and beer bottles, and then they got sent back to the bottler to be washed and sterilised and refilled so they could use the same ones over and over. We didn't call that recycling. It just made sense. We walked upstairs because we didn't have an escalator in every shop and office building. We walked to the shops and didn't climb into a 300 horsepower machine every time we had to go 2 blocks. Back then, we washed the baby's nappies because we didn't have the throwaway kind. We dried clothes on a line, not in an energy-gobbling machine burning up to 220 volts. Wind and solar power. Kids got hand-me-down clothes from their brothers or sisters, not always brand new clothes. We refilled writing pens with ink instead of buying a new pen. We replaced razor blades in the razor instead of throwing away the whole thing just because the blade got dull. We bought a camera and used it until it fell to pieces, not disposable cameras. When we packaged a fragile item to send in the mail, we used a wadded-up old newspaper to cushion it, not styrofoam or plastic bubble wrap. We wrapped the garbage in yesterday's papers, and some of us even remember the days when we cut up squares of it for use in the loo. The good old days, ladies and gentlemen. We didn't fire up an engine and burn petrol just to cut the lawn. We used a push mower that ran on human power. We exercised by working, not by going to a health club to run on treadmills that operate on electricity. We had one electric outlet in a room, not an entire bank of sockets to power a dozen appliances, and we didn't need a computerised gadget to receive a signal beamed from satellites 2,000 miles out in space in order to find the nearest pizza joint. There were no pizza joints. No takeaway. We cooked at home, in the kitchen. We blended and stirred by hand. We had one TV or radio in the house, not a TV in every room, and the TV we had was a small screen the size of a handkerchief, not the size of a bedroom sheet. But no, we didn't have the green thing back then. Speaking of television, baby boomers can't take credit for the creation of television. That honour belongs to the generation before ours. What were they called? It was the post-World War I baby boomers, the pre-labels for generations, Anyway, them. We didn't create it, but we enjoyed the new medium in all its grainy black and white, problems with the vertical hold, bunny-eared, sticker-hanger-out-the-window glory. But the state in which it now finds itself is definitely not our fault. I lay the creation of reality television fairly and squarely at the feet of Gen X, Y and Z, the mobile phone generations, the everyone must be on TV all the time generations. We told stories. The Forsyte Saga, Roots, MASH, Homicide and Skippy. We used actors. Andy Warhol was only able to envisage 15 minutes of fame, not 15 seasons of banal garbage consisting of pointing a camera at anything to see if it moves, what we call suck it and see TV. For a couple of years, we had a daily 15-minute show about cooking called Cooking with Kerr, remember the galloping gourmet? Now we only have two types of show. Shows about cooking and shows about weight loss. One shows us how to fill our faces, the other how to starve. Look, it's fabulous that we've got such a variety of food these days, but do we really have to spend so much time watching it being prepared and cooked? Huge hit in Africa, I reckon. There may well be 150 possible television channels on offer, but they offer a lot less value than the two we baby boomers enjoyed. And don't even start me on the radio. Sorry, ABC. That is really not my fault. If I wanted to listen to talkback radio, I would have tuned into 3AW or gone to live in Sydney. As I said at the start, like all baby boomers, I came into being as the result of a vast, worldwide outpouring of lust that swept up my parents and all other human beings in the Western world in its all-consuming desire to have sex, in the vast sigh of relief at the conclusion of World War II. I am merely the result of this vast spawning. It's not my fault I was born, it's my parents'. And I think that you will find this is the default position for all baby boomers. Thank you.